This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
By the way, you have been awesome in the chat. I'm not ignoring it. It's just been fantastic. It's been, there's so much stuff that we've gotten to talk about that we had to get to. But getting some of the comments here, and Greater Good mentioned this earlier on. There's no real dog in this, and I mean dog in a bad. You have dogs in a good way, DAWGS, and that's what the Heat are when they're in the kennel. And then you have dogs in a bad way, like a bad team in a playoff mix. I don't think maybe Charlotte would be the team, even though they can scare you with how much they can score. But I look at Cleveland and Atlanta, and especially Cleveland, if they can get Jared Allen back, as being at least a team that could be a real pain in the you-know-what. And with Atlanta, I know the Heat have come up with good plans throughout the year against Trae Young. It does concern me that they have Clint Capella and John Collins inside. John Collins has been a Heat killer. And so, like, you have those, and Capella was able to give him a lot of fits the other night. And you have somebody like Bogdanovich, and you have somebody like Kevin Huerter. I mean, there's not an Indiana Pacers 2020 in this grouping, right? And even that Pacers team, you look back, and at the time it was like, okay, well, they have Oladipo, they have Malcolm Brogdon, Domantas Sabonis was not playing because he was hurt, but Miles Turner. You look at the three teams that they have left, and we're talking about the potential matchups. Who is the team that you would view as the best matchup for the Miami Heat? The team that if you were to, you're talking about the good eggs, the bad eggs. We have 3 eggs left now. Who is the best egg that you would pick from a Heat perspective, the shiny one that you would want to see in this first round matchup?
I guess first, Clay, I'm going to take people through how we're going to get there. And yesterday's play-in game between Brooklyn and Cleveland in Brooklyn decided the number 7 seed. Brooklyn won. They will play Boston in the first round in the 2-7. Cleveland, because they lost, gets to host a game on Friday in the winner-take-all final play-in game in the Eastern Conference. Tonight in Atlanta, Charlotte will be playing the Atlanta Hawks. The loser goes home. We're now in the make or break. There's no more second chance here. So Charlotte plays in Atlanta tonight. The winner of that game, the Hawks or the Hornets, then go Friday to Cleveland to play Cleveland. The winner of that game plays the Miami Heat starting Sunday, 1 p.m. FTX Arena. Pretty good scheduling for the Heat because the other team's going to have about a 39-hour turnaround from the game of Cleveland. So I guess what we first need to do is look at the game tonight. And to get a sense of what happens, it'll be on ESPN, 7 o'clock, Atlanta versus Charlotte. I think Atlanta's a much better team than Charlotte. But Charlotte at the end of the season was playing very well. The difference is Gordon Hayward is out now. He's always out at the end of the season. It seems like Gordon Hayward, no matter where he is, there's some sort of injury. You remember the bubble, how he left and his wife is pregnant, and he came back and he got injured and he wasn't the same. I think Atlanta wins that game. Now, if you're asking me who should Heat fan root for, I think Charlotte's the better playoff matchup for every reason you just mentioned, Clay Ferraro, and that's this. Not only do you have Trae Young, who led Atlanta to the conference finals last year, and in any game is capable of scoring 40, might be on 50, 60 shots, but it's scoring 40, but you have the kind of three-point shooters who can get hot in Bogdanovich, in Danilo Gallinari, in Kevin Huerter, in the guys you mentioned, and all it takes is 1 or 2 hot hands in the playoffs to sort of get you into trouble. So I think Heat fan would prefer that Charlotte wins tonight. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Atlanta at home, although it's one of the worst home court advantages in the NBA, I think for a moment like this, they might get a little closer to what we saw, not all the way Minnesota yesterday. When it comes to Cleveland, even watching the game last night against Brooklyn, you could see the talent there. Yeah. Darius Garland is great. Darius Garland is on the verge of all NBA. What he did in that road setting against Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant cannot be overlooked down to the last seconds, getting layups, hitting threes, keeping his team in there. That was a Cleveland team without Jared Allen, who really has frustrated the Heat at the rim. Jared Allen almost reminds me sort of, I don't know if you're in Miami yet or these are still your Fort Myers days. Do you remember the Roy Hibbert days with the Pacers?
Oh, 100%.
Now, where were you? Were you in Fort Myers then, or were you already down here in Channel 10?
No, I got here in the, I want to say it was the last 2 or 3 years, but my first year here was the last year of the Big Three.
Okay, so before that, you were over in Fort Myers or
So I do remember, by the way, I think it was Jonathan Zaslett, their morning show, they called him a trash can. They called Roy Hibbert a trash can. Which,
and yet, remember the whole principle of verticality? And he was blocking every damn heat shot. And the Heat were complaining, no, he's leaning forward. No, he's not going straight up. Jared Allen is that kind of absolute pain in the ass nuisance. So, Clay, when you asked me, we did this earlier in our show. If you have missed it, catch it on the podcast on our Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint. We talked about the teams we didn't want in the Heat's half of the bracket. So you're asking me now that last egg. I'm assuming it's going to be Atlanta at Cleveland, 7:30 p.m. on Friday. Who would I rather see the Heat face? And I don't do this a lot. People know me. I very rarely exhale. But you know what? I'm not sure. It's two different types of challenges. With Atlanta, it's the dynamic scorer challenge that one guy can beat you on his own with this three-point shooting. With Cleveland, it's the interior bludgeoning that you could wind up with an all 7-foot front line of Larry Markkinen, of Evan Mobley, of Jared Allen, and then with the unique twist of Kevin Love off the bench, probably with Darius Garland being the best, I don't know, it doesn't sound fair, most dynamic wing player on the court in the matchup against the Heat.
I think that's fair.
I probably would say I'd rather play Cleveland because I've told you this for weeks on our shows here and with Big O and our accurate Pembroke Pines Miami Heat reports. I always prefer to play the team that's just glad to be there. Cleveland, to me, would be a lot like we saw Minnesota last night. No matter what else happens for the Timberwolves, they had their moment. And they can go into the offseason and go, yay! I think Cleveland's the same. I think Cleveland, if they just make the playoffs, who the hell thought the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to be in the Eastern Conference playoffs this year ahead of teams like Washington or ahead of New York or even Indiana? They've accomplished their goal. Atlanta made it last year to the Eastern Conference Finals. They know how to win these kind of series. So I probably would take the Cleveland Cavaliers as my preference. But you know what? Not going to be easy. Both the Cavaliers and the Hawks will create a first round for the Heat that I would not be surprised, Clay, I'll get your opinion on this now, that it could go 6 games against either of those teams.
Yeah, and so I think we're both on the same page that Charlotte is the one that you'd be like, okay, I'm fine with that. That's a 4 or 5 game series. You don't have to deal with the toughness, and that's not, it's not calling Charlotte soft. It is, they are who they are. They're not the team that's going to grind on you and make those 5 games feel like 8 games. Cleveland would. I do think that Atlanta would for different reasons. With Cleveland, I'll say this about Cleveland because I've been with you on the whole they're happy to be there thing. I saw something with them last night, and there's a mental toughness with that team. And to fall behind like 20, by 20 like they did against the best player in the world, against Kyrie Irving, who was perfect, literally perfect in the first half.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And then to stick with it and know that, like, you know what? We just got to keep chipping away. There was like a Miami Heat thing to that team, what we saw from them last night. I was really impressed with their mental toughness and doing that without the guy who's really the fulcrum of their defense, which is Jared, and the guy who's the rim protector. So I was more impressed by them last night in a loss than I had been even in some of their victories last year. Now, with all that said, I do think that the Heat win against both of those teams. I probably lean more towards not wanting Atlanta because as well as the Heat have played against Trae Young and found a way to slow him down, whether it's Caleb Martin or Gabe Vincent, like
double
you
teams,
found guys to kind
traps.
of throw at him to make his life miserable.
And you give Eric Spoelstra time to game plan against anyone. It's different than the regular season. Yeah, I agree with that.
But to your point, there are other guys on that team that if Trae Young is able to defer and other guys can get open, they have guys who can knock down that open shot. And the other thing that we're talking about the interior presence of Cleveland, and rightfully so. I'm going back to what I said earlier. I think maybe we're minimizing a little bit the interior presence that Atlanta has when everybody is healthy with that.
If Collins is healthy.
If Collins is
killed
healthy.
Him. Yes.
He's killed him. He's killed him historically. And so Clint Capella, we saw what he can do against Miami the other night. You used the word dynamic, and that's not just with Trae Young and his ability. That team can beat you multiple ways. They can beat you by protecting the rim, even though their numbers may not be, but they can beat you in multiple ways. Whereas with Cleveland, it's one of those where you're concerned because they can grind on you, and Darius Garland can maybe do just enough.
He's terrific. So let's do the talk show type of thing now before maybe we finish up with some text from our listeners. let's play this game of if the Heat play X, where do you see the series, okay? And let's do one in retrospective. If the Heat got the Brooklyn Nets in the first round, Clay, what would your prediction terms of games been Heat versus Nets? They're not going to, but if that happened, if the Nets wound up as 8, you would have said Heat or Nets in
6 or 7. I mean, I know that's easy to say. I probably, after what I saw last night, probably 6. I think the Heat would win in 6.
Yeah, I was going to say probably Heat in 7 because I think maybe winning in Brooklyn, their fans might actually show up and be something. I think that could have gone to the wire. I think Boston, Brooklyn, by the way, can go 7 and it's going to be a dynamic series. Okay, least likely of the possibilities remaining, Heat versus Hornets. What do you got, Clay?
Heat in 4, maybe 5.
Yeah, the gentleman's sweep, people call a 5-game where they get someone there because, you know what, maybe purple shirt guy shows up and he throws someone off their game or something like that. I'd say Heat Hornets, probably 5 games. Okay, Heat Cavaliers.
I want to go 5 or 6. I'm going 5. I think Darius Garland gets a game in, but I do think that the Heat go into Cleveland. If they split the 2 here, the Heat would wake up really fast and go and win the 2 in Cleveland, then come here and win game 5.
I think 6 because, one, I think the Heat can win on Cleveland's home court there. And I think there's 2 elements. I think there might be the big man game. There might be the, holy crap, they're out-rebounded 60-40. There might be that game, and Darius Garland might have a game. And last, Heat against the Hawks.
Real quick, let me ask you about this, about Cleveland. Is there a way – I remember what the Heat did to the Lakers, and it was, it took Eric Spoelstra a couple of games to figure out, all right, how do we work with this with Bam, Ailing, and Goran out? And they were getting beat on the boards pretty bad. They eventually realized if we go small, we can play Dwight Howard off the floor. And they did. And once Frank Vogel adjusted, it was over in 6. But with that Cleveland team, is there a way to do that against this Cleveland team to where, like, we're sitting here saying, oh, how do you combat their big guys inside? Is there a way in a playoff series to play their big guys off the floor?
The only way to do it is to have enough stretchy big men, which the Heat do not have. I know Dwayne Dedmon shot almost 50% on threes, but no one's going out to guard him on the line. PJ Tucker, if he comes back healthy, remember he has that calf strain. That's a concern. Same injury Luka Doncic has. He might provide some stretchiness. The Heat could go smaller, with the first reserve big man being Caleb Martin. And if Caleb can hit the 3 and his athleticism, that might happen. I think the opposite would happen in the Cleveland series, Clay. I think they would play Dwayne Dedmon off the floor for this reason. When Jared Allen goes out, they'll bring in Kevin Love. The 2 bigs then will be Kevin Love and Evan Mobley. I'm not sure there's a matchup there for Dwayne Dedmon. I think there's more of a matchup there for Caleb Martin, maybe even Markieff Morris. So again, this is what we spoke about early in our shows in our first couple of segments. If you missed them, catch the podcast, is matchups will impact a lot of these things. There might be a Heat 9 that we believe best fit, but in each series it could be different. If the Heat had a Myers Leonard type or a stretchier 5, then maybe. But Bam Adebayo is still a mid-range at best kind of shooter. So I think in most matchups, Jared Allen gets to patrol the paint and won't feel he has to step out a little bit more. So I think that makes it a challenge.
So now we're moving on to the Hawks. I would probably say Heat in 5 there too. It's funny. Like, I talk myself into them being a threat, and then you mentioned something about the home court advantage or lack thereof. And I know what do they call it? The highlight factory, or is that what they called it back when they were the number 1 seed and didn't go anywhere? But I just think ultimately that, look, I think there's going to be a Trae Young game if you were to play Atlanta.
Yes.
I do think, though, that the Heat can scheme ways to mitigate that. And maybe you do. Maybe it goes 6, but I would think the Heat would find a way to either split at home, win 2 in Atlanta, or vice versa, then come back and take care of business.
And I agree. And Atlanta does not have the same mojo they had last year. And Atlanta, a lot of times this year, has had the look of a team that just wants to be over this and is done. That John Collins wants his own team. That Trae Young's ridiculous 30-foot shots, even when they go in, might not exactly be what teammates want. Also, do they want to be a big physical team? Do they want to go more with wings? These older guys, Bogdanovich and Gallinari, they're not part of the future. DeAndre Hunter needs to get more run. He was terrible in that game against the Heat last Friday. So they have so many questions. I think you can get in their head. And once you get in their head, you can get the series over, then move on to Philly or Toronto. So we'll find out on Friday who the Heat are playing in the first round. We'll be back after 2 games next Wednesday in the middle of that series. The Heat are home Sunday and Tuesday against that team. Then they go on the road next week. So we'll have a better sense a week from today, not only who are the Heat playing, but what they've done in the first 2 games.
Real quickly, as we wrap up the show, Heat are going to practice today, and we'll probably find out more. But are you hearing anything, any whispers on PJ Tucker and whether he would be available for game 1 or anything around those?
PJ was a grade 1 sprain. If that's the case, it should be about a week. He's had about a week, even a little bit longer. So I would think he's okay. It's different than Luka Doncic. He has a calf strain also. They haven't said what grade. Grade 2, you're getting to 2 weeks. Grade 3, you're getting to, maybe even a month or so. So if the initial prognosis is what it is, number 1, and 2, PJ Tucker is who we think he is, he will be available. The question is, how many minutes will he get based on the matchup? That becomes part 2 of it. He's important to the Heat, but probably of their starters and the rotation players, he's probably not more than, say, the 5th or 6th most important player in their rotation.
And lastly, anything on Bam?
Again, Bam entered protocols. He tested positive for whatever reason in Orlando. I'm told he should be out of protocols either in time for Friday's practice or Saturday's practice. But he still can be working out, staying in shape. It's not debilitating. It's a happenstance. And unfortunately, there's a new wave coming around. It's been mostly in the Northeast. If the Heat have to go to the Northeast to play in the playoffs or go north, it could become another impact factor. What we thought was over the last 2 seasons apparently is here to stay for a while.
Thank you, guys. As always, the playoffs are here. It is the most wonderful time of the year if you're a Heat fan. We will talk about games 1 and 2 and look ahead next week right here on Inside the Paint.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.